Now, tobacco traders and associations were calling at the time for the ban on cigarettes to be lifted, as it induced the rise of illicit cigarettes and disrupted the productivity as well as profitability, of the market holistically. FITA was one of the tobacco associations that had a long-standing legal battle with the government over this ban. To tell us a little bit more about the effect that the lockdown has had on the tobacco industry to date is chairperson of the Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association, Sinenhlanhla Mnguni. Sinenhlanhla, very good morning to you. Welcome to the AM edition of Newsfeed. I mean, you have really had a tough year, especially looking at the impact of sales of cigarettes and tobacco and its entirety. You've been at loggerheads with government trying to ensure that you make a profit when it comes to jobs and securing the tobacco industry. Let's look back at the struggles that you went through up until today.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, give us a sense of the impact of the lockdown, the hard lockdown on the tobacco industry.
Morning. Yes, look, we thought, of course, that following the lifting of the ban on the 18th of August last year, the troubles of the tobacco industry would be over, but it seems that, of course, the ban, the 5-month-long ban, was the catalyst for what can only be described now as one of the biggest illicit markets in the world. What we're seeing now is that the local cigarette manufacturers are battling to compete with the underworld sort of manufacturers who are based in our neighboring countries, who now dominate the market in as far as cigarette consumption in South Africa. And of course, we had cautioned government about this when they implemented the ban, and it was one of the arguments we also raised in our legal papers. So what we're currently seeing is following a ban where legitimate cigarette manufacturers weren't able to trade for 5 months, they are now battling to regain market share, which has been lost to illegal elements.
Now, Sinenhlanhla, has the government done anything at all to curb this illicit trade and to help the local producers to regain that market share that you speak of?
Look, I mean, we've had plenty of engagements with government in as far as this issue is concerned. There's a lot of talk about what they're going to do, strategies that they're going to implement. But as far as things go at the moment, they seem to be losing that fight. And I mean, there's a lot of talk, but there seems to be little action. And what we're actually seeing is more sort of policies being implemented which impact on local manufacturers, and nothing is being done to contain the rapid spread and growth of the illicit trade and the smuggling coming in from our neighboring countries. So again, I mean, it's all talk, and it seems that there's nothing of substance that has been coming from the side of government as far as combating this illicit trade. And of course, as a tobacco industry, we've volunteered our help because it's something that is really, really impacting business. I think if this should go on for another year, you won't have many legitimate players in the South African cigarette industry left.
Sinenhlanhla, on top of all your grievances, we know that the Finance Minister Tito Mboweni then announced in his budget speech that there would be a sin tax that would be increasing here, which meant that a packet of cigarettes costs a little bit more. How much of an impact has this had, or perhaps is it going to have in the future, when you look at the history and where you come from when it comes to a hard lockdown and the implications that followed thereafter?
Look, this is one of the biggest rating factors when it comes to the rise in the illicit trade, in that because sin tax is being paid by the legitimate manufacturers, it increases their costs. But those that apply their trade in the illicit economy, of course, aren't impacted by this because they don't follow the rules. So they can still sell their cigarettes for as cheap as 8 rand. Whereas, I mean, now with things as they currently stand, the taxes alone on a pack of cigarettes are just north of 20-odd rand. So what we're finding is that it's actually encouraging those in our neighboring countries who are now, supplying excessive amounts of cigarettes into the South African economy through smuggling and other compliance, circumventing rather compliance issues. So we think that it's a serious concern that government seems to be implementing policies, again, as I alluded to earlier, which impact on the local legit manufacturers, but have impact on those who ply their trade in the illicit economy. And government doesn't seem to factor this in, and further doesn't seem to have a strategy to at least protect those that are contributing to the fiscus and paying their tax. So it's something that we did address with Minister Mnguni, a submission we made to government, and something that we've been very vocal about, that you cannot at this stage increase excise and expect legitimate cigarette manufacturers to survive. And it actually wouldn't surprise me if what government collected in terms of revenue from the industry this year is substantially less than what it has collected historically.
Now, you've raised all of this, as you mentioned, with the finance minister. How has that gone so far?
Look, I think they are in between a rock and a hard place. But again, I think that now is not the time to be placing added pressure on South African legitimate business players, because, I mean, we already went through a lot of hardships, particularly our industry, where 5 months went by where we did not trade. So I think government should be doing a lot more to be engaging industry. And I think there's a lack of understanding of the dynamics and nuances of our industry, in that government doesn't seem to be able to actually, identify the gaps in how they can properly regulate the industry. And we've always offered our assistance and guidance. There are many other academics and researchers who also understand the industry, who are better placed to assist government and guide them in this regard. And I think, whoever is advising government at this stage is definitely not doing their job properly. I think there's a lot more that can be done, particularly in as far as the issue of policing the borders. Because as things currently stand, we're actually incentivizing people to set up factories in our neighboring countries.
Let's talk rands and cents, Sinenhlanhla. How much of a dent has this had on the entire industry?
Look, you're talking billions. I mean, we know, of course, that historically, the South African Revenue Service, in terms of excise taxes alone, collects about 15 billion from the industry. When you look at that and you look at the amount of jobs that are created by industry along its value chain, and you look at the amount of South Africans, not only in the formal sector, but also in the informal sector, which rely on the industry as a method of survival, you're talking a substantial amount of money in the region of billions. And that's being lost. And of course, the South African economy is not benefiting, because either the money is being made by people outside the country, or being made by people who simply do not pay their taxes. And that is no good for anyone in the South African economy.
Now, the South African economy obviously is at risk. What other health risks could this, or does this have, the illicit trade of cigarettes?
Look, of course, again, this is something that was also highlighted in our court papers, the substandard nature of these cigarettes that are being smuggled in, and of course are not regulated by South African authorities. We do not know where they are being manufactured, what's contained in those cigarettes, and whether they are adhering to the necessary protocols. So again, you're placing South African consumers at risk in that regard. So there's a lot that government still needs to do, and I think there are going to be further engagements, of course, between FITA and various government bodies on these issues. But I think our experience with governments for the last few years is that there has been a little or no sort of initiative from their side to try and meet industry halfway, and to try and understand the fears and concerns of industry, and to try and alleviate some of the pressures of legal tax compliant, legal registered tobacco industry players. And again, this is of serious concern to us, and as we have highlighted and stated on many occasions, it is ultimately going to bite government in the back, and we are going to lose serious revenue if these issues are not rectified, and rectified as soon as possible.
Sinenhlanhla, thank you so much for your time on Newsfeed AM. We really do appreciate you taking time out of your morning
Absolutely.
imports. Still a very tough and touchy topic of discussion, this.
Yeah. Caught between a rock and a hard place, because on one aspect, as the hard lockdown came into effect and tobacco was banned, there were many questions about the impact of tobacco on one's health.
Yeah.
Because remember, the respiratory area was one that was really important for health experts to have a look at. So I suppose now, going forward, is another tricky situation for the industry.
Absolutely. Right, that was Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association, Sinenhlanhla Mnguni.